Welcome back to Miniature Dragon Comic Review, coming to you live from Seattle, Washington. As always, I'm your host for the evening, Daniel Doc Gentry, and with me are our gurus, Woody and Alex. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello.
Hello, Doc.
How are we doing this fine, almost Christmas time, 23 days to go, December?
I'm doing good. We've been doing the Lego Advent calendar the last couple of days.
Oh.
Yeah.
Lego Advent calendar.
It's this one's Star Wars themed. You open it up and it's got a Lego kit in it for each day.
We have an Advent calendar my wife painted on wood that I put together, and it just counts down. But my favorite Advent calendar of all time somebody got me had like a new whiskey every day.
There's an Advent calendar for beer. I know that's your favorite topic.
Yeah. I know. I talk that amongst friends. We're not going to do that here where everybody can hear me.
Yeah, okay.
Are you guys okay, I'm going to admit, I'm almost done shopping.
I'm done shopping for my girlfriend.
I got done with most people around June or July.
I just have this weird thing. I want to wait. I like to see what's coming out, but I never want to get close to the whatever. For me, it's Christmas, but like anybody else's gift giving. And I try to do it traditionally for each person that I know, whatever they're going to. And my Viking ancestry wants me to tell you guys God Yule, which means Happy Christmas. So,
yeah, good Yule.
Hey, we should review a book.
We should, but usually I put a couple minutes at the top just to give us a little bit of a buffer. But thanks for crushing my hopes and dreams there. But yeah, we're gonna do the mini series Transformers Stormbringer 1 through 4. So why don't you give us a little background on that, Woody?
Alrighty. Well, this what I wanted to do actually was for the month of December focus on reviewing some graphic novels as opposed to like new issues. Because there's a graphic novel for Christmas that I wanted to do called Klaus, which we'll get to in a few weeks. But it's a really fun retelling of Santa Claus's origin. This one, however, has been on my mind for a little while because it's a book that I really enjoyed, and it's also the Transformers comic book continuity is about to get rebooted. And I wanted to make a play for a particular guest who wrote what I think is the best Transformers comic book ever. And so I was wanted to look at a couple graphic novels that I thought were kind of important and relevant in that continuity before we brought him on board. And this one was basically when IDW first started their series, they started out with one that was like Transformers hiding on Earth, having like a new version of the war against Decepticons, and it got a little bit of flack because it had humans in it. And I think the Transformers are at their best when it's just the Transformers. And so this one was the response to that, where it basically showed what was happening, what's actually going on with their war and how their society is set up and kind of like establishing the universe. And it was before they had kind of like firmed up a few things, so there's a few continuity issues, but I thought it was a really fun story because you get to see characters being cool, doing cool things, and Optimus Prime gets to be awesome, and you get to see the new designs for like Megatron and various characters, and it's just it plays with the continuity in interesting ways and establishes kind of like a new status quo. So, anyways, what did you guys think?
Why don't you jump in, Alex? I'm gonna save mine since we haven't talked about it at all. I get to surprise Woody.
Okay.
Ooh.
Oh, you probably liked it. We'll see.
So is art. Just like the last one we reviewed, I definitely like the style. I like the way that it's illustrated. I mean, it has an interesting part where, because I was a kid of 80s, 90s, I grew up with a lot of that, the parts of the Transformers. So it's like, oh, okay, just basic view. It's like, I knew who they were. In comparison to like say Bayformers, where like there's some characters where their redesign is so different or over the top, it's almost like a new character. Where like I remember these action figures,
Yeah.
to a certain extent. And granted, some of the names were kind of like, oh, okay, I've forgotten because it's just been that amount of time. But yeah, once again, as art wise, I thought it had a really good look. Loved the way that it was colored, and the way that it was illustrated was quite amazing. As story went, I didn't feel too bad on like following it. I definitely feel that kind of needed the rest of the story to understand some aspects, but during part of the description, it tells you enough within this trade paperback. If this was like your first interactions with it, you get enough of like what's going on with Cybertron, what's going on with the rest of the universe, and whatnot.
Yeah, it was meant to be the first introduction. Actually, that was the point.
Mm.
This is the beginning, and I realized I actually never actually said what the plot is, but the basic premise of the story is that unlike in our regular continuity in the cartoons that we're all familiar with from the 80s, the Transformers never slept for millions of years. So in this continuity, they basically have been fighting nonstop, all that time, and so you have a scenario where the war just went on so much that it destroyed Cybertron and reduced it to basically a burnt-out wasteland that even the Transformers can't survive on. And it focuses on a particular Transformer, Thunderwing, who attempted to utilize the Pretender process, which was kind of what they invented back when the toys were coming to their end, and turned himself into this monster that nobody could stop. And in the course of the story, somebody finds him and resurrects him and decides they're going to scorch the universe. So.
Oh, right. Yeah, wasn't it Darkwing Duck?
No, it was Bludgeon.
Oh, right. No, there was a character by the name Darkwing, and every time that I read it, I was just thinking, let's get dangerous.
Yeah. Well, the sad part is that I know all these characters for the most part. I remember what they do, and I'm this comic book is clearly written for me.
It's very nostalgia.
Oh yeah, like the character Darkwing. I believe he's one of those ones where the two Transformer Decepticon jets turn into a super jet that can fly through space. So yeah, Doc's gonna yell nerd in a minute.
I am not. I am wondering. I was just wondering, Alex, were you done? You didn't hit all three, so I was just wondering.
Oh, yeah, as lettering, I can't think of anything that really stuck out as horrible. Most of it I thought flowed really well, like nothing that I could see that made me confused of which character was talking. Only part of dialogue that I was kind of wondering about was would a society of sentient robots actually use the word life signs when a character was getting damaged and injured to the point of potential death? And, that kind of was one of those things of I paused the comic and kind of thought about it for a while and did some other stuff and then went back to the comic. But, it was just one of those things of it kind of threw me mentally speaking through a loop, because it was, they're not biological entities, but at the same time, they're sentient enough not to just be basic AIs. So, what kind of verbiage would they have? Would they talk about life signs or things of that nature?
In this continuity, Transformers do have a soul. There is a god that gives them life, and a piece of that god's life force is handed out to them to animate their bodies. Mm-hmm. So there is a life force there, not just a machine.
Well, that kind of goes into that interesting philosophy part of, is fire alive? It consumes, it needs oxygen, and...
Huh. I mean, it's got a pretty short life cycle if it is.
Yeah.
Well, it comes down to what's the definition of life.
Yeah.
And I've heard that before. And it's when I went through schooling, a lot of my science classes, that was actually one of the good questions that we always had, and it was just telling us that when we do things, be honest with our observations and make sure that we're doing good science, because it will create other problems down the line if you just try to make something work. All right, so for me to get into it, let's start off with lettering. I thought lettering was really well done. There's a lot of dialogue and a lot of stuff being written all over the place, and I did not lose my place. I knew what was going on. I knew who was saying what. In all the lettering, very clear, very easy to write. Again, they weren't trying to reinvent the wheel, and always that impresses me. And there was still some stuff like where they had to get a little unique about doing radio, people talking, and then like the narrative dialogue. And I think it was really well done. So I'm going to start off with a good thing. The second part is I'll use the story. And especially now that you said this is like the first introduction thing, I couldn't follow along. I didn't even know what was going on until the second book. I really, or the second chapter, whatever. In ours, it was the second book, but I was so lost. I couldn't even tell you what was going on in the first, and then halfway through the second, and then I finally thought I figured it out, and I'm only giving it some credit. It really wasn't until the third book that I actually knew what was going on. And it was super hard to follow the story with that. But again, I don't know about this. I wasn't reading Transformer comic books right off of that. My only introduction to them was, again, the toys and the cartoon, and then later on the movies. And like I said, it was really weird. It was also very hard for me to just see the difference that was going on. And I'll tell you what, I didn't really feel like there was a fight going on with this. I felt like this was a whole nother story into a whole nother universe, and almost looked like everybody was working together kind of thing. Until later on, and then I figured kind of what was going on and exactly why they were working together and what was happening. The art in this, though, is really, really awesome. And I mean, outside the cartoon, the movies, all the other things, the art style here was neat, and I just want to give props to the shading and shadowing. So many times people try to do that and they get it wrong. And this was really well done. I could tell you which direction the light was all the time. I never felt lost with that. I could see the story as it was. Little details that you know about Transformers was very on task, and there was little extra details that was put into it. I'm very happy about that. They really do look war-torn. They don't look perfect. They don't look pristine. I thought the art was gorgeous in this book. Again, my only downfall of the whole thing was the story itself, and I was kind of hoping to be like, oh, I could have had a hard time following down the story, but I didn't read, these books from before, and then Woody introduced us to, well, this is kind of the first set in this. Yeah. And that's where I am.
Yeah. There was one other graphic novel they did, which came right before it, but this was intended to be a standalone book. The other book might have answered a couple things, but nothing that was important to the story. And actually, because the only thing that really would have been explained in the other book was just the definition of siege mode, where the Decepticons had their 5 stages of infiltration in a society. But I think you pretty much got what siege mode meant, in this book. Like they're basically ready to fuck somebody up. And I dropped the F-bomb.
Yeah.
Okay, anyways.
Childs. My thing with the whole thing is I usually I want to read forward, even if I don't enjoy a comic book. I want to go forward and see, and it always makes me want to know the end. Literally about 1.5 books into reading this, I didn't want to keep going. And the only reason I continued was because I knew we were going to talk about it on the show, and the last time I didn't read all the way through on a book, I was lost all the way through the show. And that's just me. It's my personal thing. And I love Transformers. But again, my Transformers were the really... And by the way, kids today, you don't understand this. The really complex toys when they first came out of transforming them from a robot back to the truck, they did not make it easy. You needed a guidebook. It was kind of... I don't know what I'm going to talk about.
Well, there are some things about this that I really love. Just aside from just the fact that, obviously I was able to handle the story fine because this book, clearly meant for someone like me. But I mean, like, you're not wrong in that the story itself, I think, could have been a bit more concise. Like, I knew what was going on, so I could follow it, but it wasn't like it was written a little obtuse. You know, it's definitely a book where you probably need to have the wiki open to to look up what a couple of things are as you're reading it. You know, but like another thing is, it always amazes me when an artist can draw a robot like this, because this isn't like drawing a person. Like most artists can draw anatomy pretty well. Like you can look at a muscle magazine or look at how to draw comic books, and they have all these guides on how to draw human anatomy. But to draw these machines and to be able to envision, like, okay, well, this thing has to dip in here a little bit. You have to conceptualize that at different angles. That's a whole next level of art, and not everybody can do that. And it always blows me away when I see these comic books and they have these artists able to draw these things, and not just draw them, but they can draw them on schedule, and just as fast as if they're doing people. And I think that's just extraordinary. I mean, like.
So what was the turnaround on these? I didn't look at the date. How quickly did these come out?
They were coming out monthly, but this one was a miniseries. So what they would do is, like, Dan Figueira was the main artist on most of the early Transformers comics, but occasionally they bring in a fill-in, But they eventually they started doing monthlies, and I think like the monthlies, they started 6 months early. The guy draws. It's going fine. Then you'll have a fill-in artist so the guy can get caught up. So I think these guys can probably takes like 40 days to finish an issue or so, but some guys are faster.
I'm only wondering because one of the good things about this when I was reading it was the art. And another thing too, and I don't know who this goes on. I meant to ask you, and I don't know. I forgot. So in most comic books like this, even the last Transformers one that we did, when there was a battle, I don't know if it was lettering or the art, but I could hear the battle happening. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I didn't get the same from this one. It was like the voices were clearer in the battles than the battle itself was. I don't know. It's something weird, but I did notice it.
Well, that's actually something for me that I was finding interesting, is that I'm going through the book, and it's like, what I loved the most about it was how creative the sound effects were. In fact, there were a couple examples of sound effects that I'm like, oh, I'm saving that one for later. Take a little screenshot, and I'm like, I want to refer back to that, because the creativity of how these guys do their sound effects. Like when I want to figure out how to do sound effects and think of something cool, I will sometimes go to the Transformers comics for inspiration.
And I'm not saying that. I hope that's not how it came off. It was that the battle itself seemed secondary to the dialogue that was happening, where most books you feel like the battle's going on with the dialogue that's happening during it. Yeah. And I didn't get that in this book, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I can kind of see that, because again, it was like it was written by Simon Furman, and the reason why they went to him is because he's often regarded as like the greatest Transformers writer ever. He was the best one they ever had in the UK. They brought him over to the United States to write the United States books, and he was writing the original Marvel series up until it got canceled, and not because he wasn't any good. And so, he's kind of been the go-to guy. But I think that, again, like, the story could have been a bit more tighter. I think it needed a better editing. I guess listening to what you're saying there, I probably like, well, they picked Simon Furman. He knows what he's doing, and they kind of gave him some free reign. And the book's fine if you're like a hardcore fan. And they wanted to satisfy the people, because previous to this, Dreamwave was doing a really cool series that got canceled because Dreamwave folded, and Simon Furman was writing those. And I think that they wanted was to bring in enough creative talent from the previous one that they would retain the fan base from the previous series. And that may have been a lot of it, give the guy a little bit more creative freedom, see what he does. But yeah, they really could. The story really did, I think, needed to be tightened up a little bit.
Well, and that's where I kind of lost interest when I realized what was happening with the storm that was happening and other things, like especially like the one shot where you're in the lightning behind you, you see the image of the other Transformer, and I was like, that should have been more. I don't know. I should have felt that more. It should have been more boom-y to me. And it just didn't have that kick.
Yeah, that needed to be a little bigger. There's another factor in this which interested me a lot in these early Transformers comics from IDW is that, and I'd love to see what you think of this, Alex, but they had a very creative mechanical design to the voices, where you felt like you were hearing a machine talk. And in the show, they always modulated the voice to make it sound very artificial. And one thing that I really appreciated that in the early run of these books, and then eventually they just dropped it, and the Transformers have the same word balloons everybody else did. And I thought that's kind of a missed opportunity, because I like it when you use the word balloon is used from a lettering standpoint to establish like there's something different about the voice. How like the evil supernatural creatures usually have black bubbles with white lettering, and sometimes you get like the wobbly effect around it to kind of get the idea the voices doing something funky. And
like you have from other series like Marvel, you have the original intention of Deadpool having that yellow was he had a real gruff kind of voice, gravelly, and you know, like having within part of the effects like a red bubble around to indicate like this is enraged or this is anger, or having the spikes come out to like also indicate rage.
I saw a sample one time of the Human Torch where his word balloons were on fire. So like that was that was neat, and I think it's a cool point for art direction, but you know they it's something that they dropped eventually, and I feel like that's a bit of a missed opportunity, and I'm not sure why it would get dropped. It's certainly a lot more work to do it this way.
How do you draw a word bubble or a speech bubble for David K though? I mean, David K was the animated series voice actor for Optimus Prime.
That's Peter Cullen.
No, Peter Cullen was not the original one. Peter Cullen came after The Dark Knight.
I
only know this because I looked it up. Or The Last
Cullen,
Night, I'm sorry.
What was its original series?
Peter Cullen did Transformers after The Last Night, but David K did Transformers the animated until The Last Night. And then Gary Chalk is in there after the Cybertron series started.
Okay, Peter Cullen was in the original series.
Well, more importantly, they all sound the same. I like it. And by the way, it's very hard to get them apart, but how do you make a speech bubble for the Optimus Prime voice?
Oh, you make it mechanical.
You do.
By the way,
I think it would just be the face of Darth Vader all the way around. I'm just kidding.
Has anyone seen a recent Winnie the Pooh cartoon?
I have not.
They got Peter Cullen to do Eeyore, so Eeyore just sounds like Optimus Prime.
Oh no! I'm excited.
Horrible. Like the greatest childhood hero of the '80s is depressed, and it's just like what?
You should one of you two should totally draw Optimus Prime as Eeyore, and then we could combine that with the voiceover and make a video.
That would be Alex.
That would be amazing. Though I gotta say, like as speech bubbles go, I mean, you know, thinking about it, Soundwave had a very mechanical voice within the cartoon. And you know, like the some of the other characters, not as much. I mean, like another character like Starscream, you know, had that kind of not exactly high pitch, but like very pronounced voice. Mm-hmm. And you know, thinking about Optimus and some of the other characters, would you do it within the same? Because I mean, you know, Soundwave has a particular way that is very mechanical in comparison to a lot of the other characters.
It's the mechanical, but all of them are modulated. All of them had a little extra something to make them sound artificial.
Yeah, but I hear what he's saying. It's almost like you had to almost have a unique one for the ones that were more pronounced.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that the times that I've had to do that sort of thing, like what's often is common is the letterer will create a particular balloon style for this mechanical creature, right? And I've had to do this, and so you'll do that, but then frequently you'll make a standard balloon that you shrink and enlarge, and so the little ticks and stuff you put in to make it look artificial just get more and more pronounced, or less pronounced, depending upon the shape the balloon has to be, right? But in the case of what this guy did, like he created the outline, and then he added the little ticks and stuff after the fact. Like it was a lot of work to do that. That wasn't a cut and paste thing. I mean, he probably built one, saved it, and then he had the next time he had something that would fit. But it was just, it's a lot of work. The other thing that they used to do back in the Marvel day is they would sometimes put a little thing in the corner that would like a little jagged edge in the corner, and then the word balloons would be kind of like rectangular, but it would have that little thing. It's like kind of just funky looking, but yeah, it's just it's one of the things that really like sticks in my mind. When I'm reading these books, is I like that detail when people go to the extra effort to give it that voice to the character like that.
All right, what do we got? 4 minutes. Final thoughts.
Final thoughts. I thoroughly enjoyed the book. It's definitely an action-packed one, and if you're familiar with the characters and you know the lore, I think this has got it's full of so many fun Easter eggs and nods that if you're like a real Transformers fan, it's definitely a good one. If you want to get into the series, probably reading the previous graphic novel would be a good, better starting point, and then jump into this, and then go into the next one. One of the things I really loved about it, was you get to see what they looked like before reformatting for Earth. Like Optimus Prime had a totally different design before becoming the Optimus Prime we know, and same thing with Megatron, and so it's just but like I certainly would recommend this series and these books, because it was just some of the best comic books, Transformers comic books ever.
Alex?
So definitely beautiful art within this. It definitely has some good nostalgia of individuals that grew up from 80s on forward. As story goes, I do agree it's probably not a great starting point if you're getting into the series, but it's still not a bad enough comic that I don't think you'll not enjoy. Definitely pick it up for yourself and take a look.
I do recommend it, even with any flaws that it has. It's a real fun story.
And, again, if you want to look at it from your casual, I'm going to call myself the casual from now on. It was really hard for me. It seemed like it was kind of fun at the beginning until they tried to bring the story out. In all honesty, my brain was all over the place for a while there, and like I said, I had to push to get through this. If you're like me and you're just reading them barely and you just have some love for the cartoons, this would be a difficult one to get into unless you're committed. But that's just my personal thought on it. The art in this is awesome. I'm not saying it's jump out and get it for collecting, but if you like to collect things that have a unique art system, this does have some unique systems to it throughout the book. It's nothing that jumps out of the page, but it definitely is very it's grabbing, very sight pleasing as it would be. You guys have any final going aways?
Well, next week I think we'll be doing Saga Volume 2. We're as our next book, by the sounds of things. And we'll just go to Cyber Symbiosis on Twitter. We'll be posting some new pages this week for our books, and just keeping the ball rolling.
Alex?
I just want to say, getting ready for that happy holidays, and get to check out another volume of Saga is definitely quite great, because we have some books that I would say, like, I'm glad that we gone through this show, but this is a series that I definitely want to keep reading.
Yeah, why The Last Man, right?
So I just want to say that Grey Jedi are the most powerful of all Jedi. Fight me if you want to. Read more comics. Keep it nerdy and live your dreams.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.